Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 27th, 2024. The topic today is the red alert that was declared by the Schiller Institute given events over the last couple of days that have us tottering on the edge of World War III. On May 23rd, Ukrainian drones struck the Russian early warning radar system at Armavir radar station, which is in southwestern Russia. Now, this system is part of Russia's early warning system designed to detect an incoming attack. Now, why strike a location such as that? It's unclear as of this moment how much damage was done. There's been very little said about it by the Russians, but what is clear is that this is part of an ongoing pattern of escalation, which is extremely dangerous. A leading Russian senator, Rogozin, said that while Ukraine fired the drones, it is Washington that's behind this. So a top official of Russia has said that it is the complicity of the United States in this attack, which is what makes it especially troubling and dangerous. Why attack an early warning system that could trigger an all-out nuclear response? This is a nuclear chicken game, and it occurred immediately after the Russians had been conducting a tactical nuclear military exercise as a result of the escalation in the rhetoric and also the deployment coming out of NATO. Clearly, the Western military, industrial, financial complex think tankers, such as Keir Giles at Chatham House, believe that Putin is bluffing when he says that Russia will respond to attacks inside Russia, and that this response could include targeting of NATO facilities and could even include tactical nuclear response if the attacks on Russia were deemed to be threatening the security and stability of Russia. Well, Keir Giles said Putin's bluffing, and it's necessary to call his bluff. Do not hold back for fear that Putin might do something. Now, this incredibly dangerous pattern of escalation goes back to the statements by French President Macron about not letting Putin win in Ukraine and, if necessary, deploying French troops there to stop him. This was backed up by statements from officials in the Baltic states, by Sikorsky, the foreign minister of Poland, and others who are essentially saying that NATO must be prepared to fight in Ukraine. Besides Macron's statement, you then had Cameron, the foreign minister of Great Britain, saying that the Brits should have given a green light to Ukraine to strike inside Russia. And this was backed up by Grant Shapps, the defense minister. And then Blinken, the Willy Loman of U.S. diplomacy, said on May 15th in Kiev, quote, "We have not encouraged or enabled strikes outside of Ukraine, but ultimately Ukraine has to make decisions for itself," unquote. Well, that's about as close to a green light as you'll get from Blinken. Now, it's clear Ukraine can't do this, can't strike within Russia without weapons from the West, long-range weapons, including the Storm Shadow missiles from the United Kingdom, the ATACMS from the United States, and possibly the Taurus missiles from Germany. But also they need guidance from the West for targeting. And this means that you're going to have Western military people, including from the U.S., on the ground in Ukraine directing these attacks. Now, Russia is fully aware of U.S. complicity. As I mentioned, Rogozin said the Ukrainian drone strike may have been done by Ukraine, but the hand behind it was ultimately that of Washington. And this is where you see how incredibly dangerous it all becomes. Now, keep in mind, this has nothing to do with Ukraine. The war for Ukraine is lost. The Ukrainian military is buckling. They lack personnel. Today, the Ukrainians announced that there's a new offensive coming from Moscow, and that the Ukrainians are in a full-scale retreat. But the question now is not just Ukraine, but this is a collapse of the Anglo-American empire. All around the world, the credibility of the United States is lost. The U.S. complicity in the genocide against the Palestinians has put the United States against the whole global South. Increasingly, Europe is starting to distance itself from U.S. policy, U.S. and British policy. And the isolation and discrediting of the United States, especially when Blinken tours countries and tells them what they can do and can't do, supposedly defending the idea of a rules-based order, and what he's really doing is selling a concept which is completely fake, which everyone knows means the United States is reserving for itself the right to stomp on other sovereign nations and force them to accept the looting of the predators of the empire. Now, this is a violation of international law. How can you do that while proclaiming yourself to be the protectors and the benefactors of the rules-based order? So the U.S. has lost virtually all credibility with African nations, with Asian nations, with South American nations. This was seen in the UN vote on the question of Palestinian statehood, in which 143 nations voted for Palestine to be recognized as an independent state, and the U.S. was one of 12 nations that voted against it. So we also see this in terms of the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice recently making decisions against Israel, and the U.S. insisting that these courts have no jurisdiction. So it means that the U.S. is now the rogue nation, not the defender of some kind of idealized rules-based order. So this brings up the question of why I call Blinken the Willy Loman of diplomacy. And this is a reference to Arthur Miller's character in his famous play, The Death of a Salesman, in which I would say his description, which I'll read to you in a second, of Willy Loman conveys perfectly the dilemma facing Blinken as he goes door to door from nation to nation trying to sell a policy which is not only useless but dangerous if any country is willing to embrace it. Here's what Arthur Miller said in an interview with the New York Times in 1949 on the character of Willy Loman, the tragic protagonist in his play. Loman has an image of himself which fails in one way or another to correspond with reality. It's the discrepancy between illusion and reality that matters. The closer a man gets to knowing himself, the less likely he is to trip up on his own illusions. Well, it's clear Blinken doesn't know himself. He doesn't understand that he's a lackey operating on behalf of a network of global cartels. Maybe he does understand that. Maybe he figures that's how he's going to get rich and famous. But he's not fooling anybody with that persona. Now, the important point is we can't allow the future of mankind to be in the hands of such flawed, delusional figures as Blinken, Biden, the members of the U.S. Congress and intelligence community, people like Ursula von der Leyen, Sunak, Macron. These are not just flawed individuals, but dangerous, deluded individuals who see in themselves an aura of power that they can impose on the rest of the world. I've attached in the description section the Schiller Institute emergency leaflet for distribution. Join our emergency red alert mobilization. We have to put an end to the insanity of figures such as Blinken as they move us over the edge, over the red line into a nuclear World War III.